Exhaust time. We're gonna feel the power, but not exactly the way you'd think. So yeah, as you probably guessed, this is not an FMF. We're not gonna feel the power, at least in that sense. This is actually a stock exhaust from a 450X. So what we're doing is kind of considered an OEM Plus upgrade. I wanted something that flows a little better while sticking to more or less the OEM look and the OEM sound. I have plenty of other bikes that make a lot of noise, so I don't need to have another one. It looks pretty much the same, functions about the same, and should mount up the exact same. But first of all, let me just say, this thing took forever to find. I don't know if this is just because it's newer, because it only takes a stock CRF450X exhaust from 2019 and up, and maybe there's just limited supply, or people that own CRF450Xs just keep these. But initially, and this was months ago, I thought it should be pretty easy to find a stock 450X exhaust. People always are upgrading their exhausts, so of course they would have a stock exhaust laying around and I could probably pick it up for pennies on the dollar. But no, I actually started looking for just CRF450X exhausts, just looking for that, and couldn't find anything. So then I started actually looking for CRF450Xs for sale, seeing if they had an aftermarket exhaust. I would message them saying, hey, I noticed that your bike has an FMF. Do you have the stock exhaust laying around? Could I pick it up from you? I'll give you money for it. I did that with 3 people, and then of the 3, 2 contacted me and said yes, they did, but one just straight up did not want to sell it to me at all, even though I was offering him cash just for this, and he would still be able to sell the bike, obviously. But then the other person also didn't want to sell it to me. They wanted to keep everything stock in case the new owner of their bike wanted to have everything stock. I don't know, but usually when I'm buying a used bike, I don't really find myself taking the aftermarket parts off and putting the stock parts back on. That's just me, but I don't know, maybe it's something with 450X owners. So finally, I had to start appealing to people of the community. So I looked on forums, I went on Thumper Talk, I went to Facebook groups, asked if anyone had one laying around, and finally, I commented on someone's 450X thread. They mentioned they got an FMF exhaust, and so I just direct messaged them and just said, hey, do you happen to have the stock exhaust? Could I buy it off of you? And finally, I got someone to agree to sell me an exhaust, and at a reasonable price too. That was the other thing, is that occasionally I would get people interested in selling me their exhaust, but they were asking, $300, $400 for this piece right here. If I go to FMF themselves, they sell this piece for almost exactly the same price, maybe a little bit more. But at that point, I told them this, at that point, if I just chuck in an extra 20, 40 bucks, I would have a brand new FMF. Why would I do that? For whatever reason, people were holding on to the belief that, well, because if you buy this OEM from the factory as a brand new piece, it's $1,200. But the same is true for just about any CRF 450. I don't know what it is with these bikes. Maybe it's just that they're new and there's not enough stock on the aftermarket laying around. But in any case, after many months of almost daily searching, I finally found one for a reasonable price. This came from a very nice guy up in Washington State. Thank you so much. And it looks pretty much the exact same as the 450L exhaust, mounts up almost exactly the same as a 450L exhaust. The only difference is this is much lighter and this is much more free-flowing. But that's just the can. There's another piece to this puzzle, which is the header. The 450RL and the 450X actually don't have the same headers. I went ahead and got a 450X header, so it's going to be a direct fit, albeit a little bit larger. That was loud. Also, for good measure, got an exhaust gasket. These do compress when you put them in, so I figured it would probably be a good idea to get one. They're only a couple bucks. Even though this is a brand new part, all of these combined, I'm paying just under the price of an FMF Power Core. I think they were about 350 to 370 bucks. So I'm getting a full system for less than that. It should be a direct fit, although I think there is a little tab on this one that the RL does not account for, so we might have to file that away. But other than that, it should be pretty easy, and it should save us some weight too. All right, we got new and old. So I actually want to weigh these before putting the new one on, and was going through the process of just kind of putting the exhaust can and the header on a scale, and that did not work as well as I thought. Let's see if this will sit nicely. Oops. Turns out this thing is actually really, really heavy, much more so than my scale could handle. So I have a luggage kind of holder thing. This definitely can hold more than 10 pounds. So let's wire these up and see, new versus old, how much weight am I saving? All right, first the old system, about 14.5 pounds exactly. That's the whole enchilada. So let's see what the 450X weighs. And now, 450X. Up it comes. The header's a little bit heavier. Wait, really? No, I don't even believe that. Let's reset this thing. Pull this back up. Okay, that I'll believe. All right, so that thing was, what, 14.5? I just did it 10 seconds ago, and I don't even remember anymore. But that's cool. That means we're saving about 3 pounds or so in the rear. All right, so we got it lined up for the 2 bolt holes here, at least for the can. And there is a little bit of modification we have to do. So right here you can see this exhaust has this little tab here, and it's butting up against this. So it doesn't quite line up in there. But that shouldn't be a big deal. Before we put this on, I'll just file that away, or actually just hack it off. That'll be easier. All done. Only took a couple of minutes. With the exception of filing this down, it was pretty much an exact fitment. I didn't have to mess with anything else. I was worried that maybe I had to trim this plastic a little bit, but it's close, but it's not going to touch at all. And then this piece right here, the header, the 450X header is a lot longer, so it sticks out a little bit, and so as a result, the heat shield right here doesn't quite line up. The tab actually right here shows just how far down it should be, but you know, I moved it up a little bit to kind of allow for the actual part where it needs to protect my legs, and so it looks a little wonky, but other than that, it's perfectly fine. I don't think anyone would suspect this for anything other than OEM, which it is. It's OEM Plus. So maybe let's try firing it up and seeing how loud it is. I'm curious because I always test the decibel whenever it comes with the exhaust. You know this, I've done this, what, 4 times now? So let's go back to before this all ever happened and see what the OEM, the 450RL OEM, does with the decibel meter. We have things still in boxes in the before times. But let's check out what the dBO meter says as of now. So I'd say that was safely 81. And so now let's see if the 450X exhaust is any louder or the same, maybe quieter. We'll find out. So with 81 to beat, let's try this with the 450X. There we go. It sounds exactly the same, just as I suspected. And the sound level is actually a bit quieter even. I mean, it was about the same, but that's a nice surprise. So the only other thing I think we have to do here is just adjust for some of the fueling. So now that we have some more airflow, we probably will want a little bit more fuel to go in line with that to keep the ratio about the same. So now that we have the JD Jetting fuel controller back here, shouldn't be too much of an issue to just tweak those numbers a little bit. I currently have it set at about 3.5 to 4 depending on the rev range, so I don't see any reason why not to just adjust that to 4s, 4.5s, just a little step up and see how it runs after that. Okay, so we're modifying that just a little bit. So in addition to that, I did some research online and just kind of saw what other people's advice was with this and with some more airflow. A lot of people were saying that taking the airbox, even in a completely stock configuration, actually adds a little bit of horsepower, about 1 or 2. And so I thought that was probably going to be be a good idea to do myself. It's not too dusty or rainy here, so I don't have to worry about that much. So we took that off, easy, 2 bolts. And then we have adjusted the fueling here. I actually tweaked my original setup. So originally I had the idle at 6, and then from there with the revs kind of stepping it up a little bit from 3.5 up to 4. However, I looked at it a little bit more and saw other people's configurations, and even from JD Jetting themselves, they actually recommended the opposite. So instead, I've switched this and bumped it up a little bit. So now it's 6 at idle and then 4.5 in the low rev range, and then as I move up into the red, then it's a 4. So I think that would be a good starting point. I think that should allow this to run a lot better and maybe give it a little bit of extra punch. So let's put everything back together and test drive.
That's a little more pep in this red boy step. I kind of wish I did a before ride as a baseline, because if I'm honest, I have not ridden this really basically since my camping trip. Pretty much the only thing I have to base this off of is me riding the Benelli the last 2 or 3 weeks. With the airbox lid off, at like 8th throttle, I can certainly hear it. It's a lot more throatier. I'm getting some actual intake noise. Not that that is an indication of power, but you can hear it working more. But it sounds good. Everything's still where I left it. I don't know if I added extra horsepower, maybe 1, maybe 2. Even if I didn't add anything, honestly, I did add, well, remove weight. I lost about 3.5 pounds with this thing, so that's a good sign. It's always nice to have some weight reduction. Every little bit counts. I think now it's just a matter of fine-tuning the fuel settings, finding what I like, what I don't like. I'll probably do a few runs and just, you know, click it up a half step, click it down a half step, see how it feels, while taking a look at the engine temperature, making sure that doesn't spike at all. Anyway, now off to do some trial and error, make a couple tweaks. We'll see what I end up with. Overall, a solid OEM Plus upgrade. And on the cheap. How could it get any better than that? Thanks for watching.